Nations. He's been a leading voice in support of Ukraine, calling out what Russia has done. Today he is in Toronto. Bob, good to see you as always. Your thoughts on this unity we've seen here in our country when it comes to Ukraine and whether you think it's going to last?
I absolutely do think it's going to last. I think it has support among all political parties. It has support very strongly in public opinion in Canada. We've had a powerful tie with the Ukrainian community since the 1890s, since Ukrainian farmers started coming to Canada, Western Canada. So it's been a powerful, powerful shared experience. And I think the speech today by President Zelenskyy, for me, it was a real reprise of Winston Churchill's famous speech to the House of Commons in 1942. That's the speech where Churchill was told the joke about how their Germans said that they would wring England's neck like a chicken, and then he said, "Some chicken, some neck," and that's exactly the spirit with which Zelenskyy came in, describing the genocide and the brutal nature of the Russian attack, and at the same time expressing great thanks to Canada. Tremendous emotion in the hall, overpowering feeling among MPs. I think a lot of this talk about how the West isn't there for the long term is completely misunderstands the nature of the decisions that NATO has taken and other countries are taking. We are all in. We're not going to allow Ukraine to lose, and we're not going to allow Russia to win. It's that simple. And I think we all need to just put our shoulders to the wheel and understand that we didn't expect this conflict. We didn't invite this conflict. We didn't want this conflict, but we're in it. And there's no turning back now. Again, to quote Churchill, when you're walking through hell, keep going. We have to keep going and give every support we can to the Ukrainian people.
As you know, there's no end in sight, Bob. And I'm curious, we're looking at some of the war fatigue in places like the U.S. Is the plan, as best you understand it, more of the same, if I can say that? Based on what you know of Russia, is that a realistic strategy?
Well, I think we have no choice but to not more of the same. It's increasing the level of support, increasing critically our support to the Ukrainian army, which is doing an amazing job in very difficult circumstances, and frankly, not falling prey to the disinformation which the Russians and others are trying to spread on the internet and everywhere else. Constant misinformation, disinformation. This is now a cyber war as well as a war on the ground. And we have to be determined to win it in every count. I mean, the fact that some Republicans in the United States have gone off the deep end, that's their problem. It's not a view that's shared by a vast majority of the population of the United States. Every poll that I've seen in the U.S. shows a similar level of support than there is in Canada. And so I just don't believe that we're going to do anything more except for turn up the heat and really let the Russians know that they cannot win this and that they're going to pay a heavy price for this terrible, terrible mistake. Putin has made a disastrous error in starting something that can only end with his defeat. I believe that very strongly.
All right, so then let me ask you, should we be doing even more than we're currently doing, Bob?
I think the Prime Minister announced that we're going to do more. I think what he announced today was this: we're not here for the short term. This isn't a day-by-day commitment. This is a long-term financial commitment on the defense side, on the humanitarian and development side, and that is going to continue. And I think the visit today by President Zelenskyy in Toronto, he's going to have a meeting with business leaders. I think he's going to want to talk to them about what more can we do to support investment in Ukraine, and how can we do more to really strengthen the ties between Ukraine and the rest of the world, particularly Ukraine and Europe. I believe very strongly that in a few short years, very few short years, Ukraine will be a member of the EU, and it will be a member of NATO. And I think that's the only way this thing is going to end successfully for Ukraine, where they have economic partnership with the rest of Europe and a strong security partnership with Europe and the United States and Canada. That's the way it should end, in my view.
I want to pivot to another major political diplomatic story I know you're following closely, the showdown between India and Canada. The Prime Minister comes out on Monday with these allegations of Indian involvement in the killing of a Canadian citizen, Bob, in BC back in June. It doesn't seem like the government in New Delhi is going to back down. Indian diplomats, commentators in that country saying either A, they don't believe the accusations, or B, even if there may be something there, Trudeau never should have gone public with it the way he did. What do you make of it?
Well, we gave them the option of dealing with it in a discreet way, and they chose not to do that. I mean, it's not as if we haven't been in touch with them over a period of time, and they know perfectly well what information we have and what information exists with respect to what's taken place. And we are firm in our view that we need cooperation from India in getting to the bottom of what's happened. And of course, there can be bluster and steps announced, but even using words like showdown and everything else, this is not a game. This is not about people bluffing or not bluffing. This is about the security of our country, and about that there are limits to what another country can do in pursuit of what it sees as its legitimate self-interest. Countries can't come into Canada and do what we believe the Indians have been engaged in, and that I think is something which is not something where we can do anything less than what we're doing. Having said that, I don't sense any interest in the part of the government that we want to escalate this. We'd like to bring it down to a point where we continue to engage with India. We can continue to have conversations in other areas, but we have to be very firm about this. This cannot be tolerated.
The Prime Minister saying earlier today, Bob, that intelligence was shared with the Indian government, with Narendra Modi a number of weeks ago. We know that the President of the U.S., Joe Biden, also speaking to Narendra Modi at that recent G20 summit in New Delhi. I'm curious what that says to you about, Canada and its allies here, whether it be the U.S., the U.K., the other members of the so-called Five Eyes group, in terms of what really may have happened.
Well, I mean, I've taken an oath of secrecy, so all I can say is this: the Prime Minister said that we've shared information with the Indians. Then yes, we have shared information with the Indians. I can't go any further than that, except to say that I think that Mr. Sullivan's statement today, the National Security Advisor to the President, was very constructive and an important indication that the Americans are at one with us in terms of understanding our concern. And making clear how unacceptable this is. And I think it's something we have to come to terms with. I hope we can do it quickly. I hope that the Indians can see that this is not a politically motivated issue. It's not a game. It's a very serious issue affecting our national security. And that's something to which everyone who's in public office has to take very seriously.
It's also dividing some Indo-Canadians here in our country, Hindus and Sikhs, who may have very different opinions on what's going on here. And as far as the Indian government, Bob, as you're pointing out, some call them Hindu nationalists and populists under Modi, who at this point anyway don't seem all that interested in being part of an investigation. Is there an off-ramp here? What does it mean, do you think?
Well, I mean, our police investigation continues. And just, Todd, on this point, I did a review for the government 15 years ago on Air India. So I'm fully familiar with that incident, that terrible, tragic bombing that took place in 1985. I've been a member of the Security Intelligence Review Committee. So I think I have a sense of what our governments over many, many years have been concerned about. And also this fundamental, I think, misunderstanding in some cases that the Indian government needs to appreciate two things. One is there is no doubt about Canada's support for India's territorial integrity and India's unity and India's right to elect any governments they want to elect. It's a huge democracy. They can elect whichever government they want to elect. But we, in turn, have to recognize that there will be a variety of opinions by people coming to Canada. We expect them to follow the laws of Canada, which include no terrorist activity, no violent activity, and we take that very seriously. We have internal intelligence services, which the laws which apply to ensuring that Canadians are secure and people can't misbehave. So this notion somehow that Canada is a haven for anybody who wants to do bad things in the world is completely wrong. We aren't. However, we do believe in freedom of speech, and we do believe in freedom of assembly. And that's part of our charter. That's part of our Constitution. And this discussion with the Indians has been going on for over 50 years. And we cannot allow any equivocation about these principles. And I think we have to strengthen our communication on these issues and stay the course and stay steady and not get bumped around in terms of what the rhetoric is on one day or another. We're not interested in escalating. We're interested in resolving this issue.
Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Rae, always great to see you. Appreciate your insights today.
Thanks very much. See you later.
And our